Hey, this is Mr. Glonka again with Introduction to Psychology. So this is Unit 1, Lesson 1. Again, Avenues of Psychology. This one is just the psychology field. Okay, so again, make sure you have your guided notes out with a highlighter and a pen. So we'll go ahead and get started. So first thing I want you guys to look at, so I've got a couple kind of scenarios that paint towards why we actually study psychology in the first place. So the first one says it's 3 a.m. and Eric is still up playing a role-playing game online. He's a college student who has tests tomorrow and hasn't studied at all. He has spent all day, every day online playing his games and neglected his class work for several weeks, right? Eric shows complicated behavior from the point of view of a psychologist. And again, Eric remains on his computer frequently, ignoring his physiological. So again, when I say physiological, just think about his physical needs, such as sleep and hunger, from midnight until morning. Okay, so I actually kind of took this example because something like this kind of happened to my cousin, who, super brilliant kid, got a perfect score on the ACT, went to Vanderbilt, but then when he got put into this stressful situation without having parents around, he kind of felt attached to video games. And so there's like a psychological aspect of why are you doing this? And again, it's something we can think about, like, why do we make the decisions that we personally make? So continuing on with this is, he persists in this activity for cognitive and private non-observable mental reasons. Okay, there's things that we like to do to kind of help our own mental process. But this right here, cognitive, I want you to write that down and again, highlight that one. It's going to be something you're going to need to know again later. But it's linked to the thinking and understanding of an individual. Okay? So you need to know that term, cognitive. That'll be something not just for this unit, but you'll see throughout the year, but it'll definitely be on this unit's test. So, or Eric's behavior may be emotionally motivated. He goes online to avoid college life's pressures, right? Does anyone have an escape from when something gets tough? I know I do. I like to go running when things get tough, and so I'll just kind of put my headphones in, go for a long run / walk, and kind of lets me escape from things. Subconscious, mental, and behavioral factors may also be present in this, and we'll get into more of these types of things as we go through later units. Again, this is just kind of an introduction to a lot of this stuff. So, psychological learning can help you gain, and again, I want you to highlight all 3 of these bullets as we go through. The first one says, a better understanding of your own behavior, okay? That's one thing, like, the more I teach this stuff, the more I study this stuff. I think back to things that I've done in the past or I'm currently doing or decisions I know I have to make in the future, and it kind of helps me understand my mental or my cognitive process through this. Next one is understanding how your psychologists study behavior in humans and animals. So one thing we'll also kind of look at is predicting in a second. So if we can understand how a lot of these behaviors are made, we can start making predictions on what happens when presented in certain situations. And again, the last one is just practical ways to enrich your life. Again, that'll also go kind of with that predict type of deal. But again, make sure you have all 3 of those highlighted. So next. So psychology may offer valuable insight into our behavior. Okay? You see people that talk to psychologists. You see a lot of, we talk about, troubled teens that lash out. So they talk to psychologists to understand why their behaviors are doing this. Why are they acting in this certain way? And so now we can kind of start mitigating those behaviors. And so next one I got right here is, suppose a student is, pretty shy and destined to feel uncomfortable in groups. So we can kind of understand the social psychology of this. That's another aspect that we're going to study this year. But by social psychology, he could discover that different types of groups appear to have different impacts on their members. I behave personally in a different way when I'm around my family, when I'm around my friend group, and even when I'm around my fiance. It's just those groups of people make a big impact on how you feel, if you're comfortable, things like that. So the next thing to look at this is you're gonna highlight two things here. The first one is highlight the word psychology. So it's a scientific behavioral study tested by scientific research. So that's the first thing I want you to know about psychology. There's two things. First one is it is a science and it is backed up by research. The next thing I want you to know is, and I think a little mini typo on the slide, but psychology is the scientific study of mental processes and behaviors. So highlight that. That's going to be a word for word definition you'll see again on the exam. But such studies may involve both human and animal behaviors. We've got lots of different experiments we're looking at. We'll talk about the Stanford Prison Experiment. We'll also look at, like, there's kind of a sock puppet mother type of thing with monkeys. You've got a reward thing with monkeys. You've got several different ones that you see with rats. And then we'll start getting into the ethics of it all. You know, is it okay to run certain experiments on humans? Is it okay to run certain ones on animals? Where's the line? And then lastly, you've got psychology, when applied to humans, covers everything people think, feel, and do. We want to understand what's going on behind our own brain and thought processes. But psychologists agree there must be a systematic study of behavior. Just letting us know why we're acting these ways is super important. Next one is using a systematic method of asking and answering questions about why people think, act, and feel as they do diminishes the chance of getting to a false conclusion, right? So if we're continuously running experiments and trying to understand why we're behaving this way, we are becoming more and more accurate in our ability to predict how we're behaving and those long-term effects with it. And the last one is to understand the complexity of human behavior. Of several different approaches are required. We're going to go into those a little bit here. So you need to know they all come through, the four main goals of psychology that we're going to cover this year, okay? And we're going to continuously, in every unit, come back to these four main goals. So make sure you have these highlighted. The first one is to describe. We're going to be able to describe our behaviors, our thought processes, and understanding why we went with them. The next one, again, explain. I can explain that I did this because of this thought process. Next one is predict. So if put in a certain situation, how are humans going to react? How are humans going to act? And we'll see several different experiments just about situational or power or just being put into certain places. How is it going to force humans to act? And so we can predict it in the future. And then the last one is influence behavior. We can talk about careers like advertising. If we understand that we can influence people's behaviors through what we like to do, through certain psychological methods, you can make a lot of money off of it. You can help keep people from doing a lot of really stupid things. But these are all the four main goals. Highlight those. You're going to have to know them. Next one is any scientist or psychologist. First objective is to explain or collect information about the activity being observed and to present what is understood. So again, we're just kind of looking at this more scientific method. This is a big part of psychology. And psychologists aren't just content to state the facts, right? Instead, they're always trying to explain why people or animals, and again, we'll look at a lot of experiments with animals, act as they do. Psychologists propose these hypotheses as explanations. And again, we have to continuously test those hypotheses to make sure that they're as accurate as possible. And then again, hypothesis is an educated guess based on a tested scientific research about some phenomenon. Go ahead and highlight that. You're going to see it again on the test. You have to understand how an experiment works if you're going to be able to take this class, because understanding the basis of each of these experiments is going to be the whole kind of process of this class anyways. So as research studies are completed designed to test each hypothesis, more complex explanations are constructed called theories. So go ahead and highlight that word theories. You're going to have to know that one as well. But it's again that process of once we look at a hypothesis, we test it, and we can kind of get deeper into it and we can be more proven with it, we're looking at theories. And again, a theory right here is a set of hypotheses used to explain a phenomenon and offered for scientific study. Highlight that again, we need to know what a theory is. Usually a theory is a complex explanation based on finding from a large number of experimental studies. Again, I mentioned you may see something that comes out from one study and it may just be completely crazy and out there, but the more we do studies, the more we realize things might be closer and closer and closer to each other, the more sound our research is going to be, and the more tried and true that theory will be. So the next goal again is that prediction, right? So psychologists like to try and have the ability to predict what humans and animals will do. In the case of humans, what they will think and feel in different situations as a result of accumulated knowledge, okay? So we can kind of hopefully predict when we're put in these situations, we understand this is going to happen. The next thing is psychologists can predict future behaviors by studying descriptive and theoretical accounts of past behaviors. Do you guys ever think about, what's going to happen in the future because of things that happened in the past? The perfect way to look at this is NBA playoffs are going on, people do film study. When people are put in certain situations, they might make a certain move. So now they're able to predict what that move is going to be while they're guarding that defender when they're putting them in those situations. So it can be a very useful tool in a lot of different things. Okay, so the next one we have is finally, some psychologists are looking to have useful ways to influence behavior. You'll see this is kind of done all throughout, and there's some funny experiments that we'll watch for this one. But these psychologists undertake studies in a long-term objective of finding out more about humans or animal behaviors. They do basic science or investigation. So see this term basic science right here? Go ahead, highlight that one as well. You need to understand it and know it, but it is the pursuit of knowledge and natural phenomenons in its own interest. So you're going to see that one again, make sure you know it. All right, so off of basic science, there's something called applied science. We'll get to that towards the end, but some psychologists are more interested in finding ways to benefit us by using what we already know about individuals. So we interpret psychology as an applied science, again, that's going to be a term we need to know, and use the concept of psychology to solve more immediate problems, right? So again, applied science right here, highlight it. It's exploring ways of using scientific findings to accomplish practical objectives, okay? So we've got a lot of psychology that we can recently study from during this pandemic. One thing we'll look at is, new measures to avoid panic, and we can try and influence those behaviors. But if you remember at the beginning of this, everyone was rushing to the grocery store to try and buy toilet paper, things like that, and you're not kind of sharing with others. We need to find ways to influence these behaviors. This is something that they're looking at there. So as we keep going, basic research, go ahead and highlight this one, is being done by psychologists studying infants' ability to perceive visual patterns. Also involved in basic science are psychologists studying rapid eye movements in sleep research. And then lastly, we've got when they learn that one person has a sleep disturbance, they may try to understand the problem and clarify it, but they may not try to correct it. So again, we're just trying to understand these issues, but if we really want influence, we're going to try and correct those. So again, that's a task for applied scientists to try and correct those. All right, so it's kind of a lot on this slide. It's more of a scenario than something for you to fully understand, take notes on. But I think a lot of these have been mentioned in movies and things like this, but it's kind of that 3 blind men and an elephant scenario. So 3 blind men came across a sleeping elephant, right? So they're blind, so they can't sit or step back and look at the whole picture, right? So they got to kind of feel. So because they were blind, they couldn't see what was blocking their path. So they set out to find out what they could about the barrier. Each man put their hands on another part of the elephant, studying it in great detail and with considerable thought, right? Having felt the trunk of the elephant, the first man described the creature was thick, worm-like, and very flexible. And the next man says, "No, it's not. You must be mistaken." The second man, who sat astride the elephant, said, "This creature is wide, very round, doesn't move much." The man holding one of the tusks of the elephant added the description of a small, hard, pointed creature. So again, they're all feeling and seeing a different part of that elephant, but they're not able to step back and look at that full picture. So again, each of these men were accurate in defining what he thought it might look like or might be, but they had to integrate their accumulated knowledge to fully understand the elephant. So just as they're doing this here, we have to take all these different studies that we're doing and blend them together. There's related studies of human behavior. We can't count on simplistic explanations, right? We have to look at as many studies as we can. We have to understand that our mind and our bodies are complicated. Our ability to make decisions is very complicated. So we have to understand all the breakdowns to it. And then we have to combine the results of lots of psychological studies to understand our observations, highlight that one. You have to understand we're combining a bunch of different things. And then we like to think that people understand us. We spend time watching others and ourselves and drawing conclusions from our daily interactions about the people that we meet. So like you can even think about that. You can predict what your friends would do in certain situations because you know them so well. Nevertheless, sometimes the conclusions we draw are not accurate since our actions are not systematic. So we don't actually always behave in the way that we would normally predict them to be, and we may actually, make mistakes and look pretty stupid because we're predicting things very wrong. So again, basic science and applied science, we took these definitions down earlier, but again, you have to know them. Basic science investigates something, seeks an explanation, highlight that, and then applied science uses the research or explanation to fix and improve. So basic science, you're investigating; applied science, you're improving and you're influencing. So just understand that key difference. So again, looking at these a little bit more, and I got some examples for you. Basic science, research to add to knowledge. Some examples: research whether birds have knees, research why some trees have rough barks and others have smooth ones, and then research why gravity is weaker on Mercury. Again, that's just, we want to know why. The next one, applied science, looking to solve a problem. So examples: research whether lack of sleep correlates with productivity. So again, we're trying to solve problems. You need to sleep more if you want to be more productive. Research whether the full moon has a positive or negative effect on people who are mentally ill. So we're trying to see if we need to have extra preparation ready during that full moon for certain people. So psychologists rely on scientific method, go ahead and highlight that, to ensure that data is collected accurately and systematically, and that way everyone will be collecting data the exact same way, right? And psychologists, data are obtained from methods like experiments, surveys, and case studies. We're going to get way more into those later on. But while psychologists use scientific method to prove and explain certain hypotheses, many behavioral questions remain unanswered, and we're going to have to continue to look deeper and deeper into each of these things. The psychological theories are reviewed and updated continuously, okay? So again, research is never stagnant. We always have to keep moving forward with it. And then new theories and advances in technology are continually generated. New questions and new psychological studies are continually produced. So the next person we've got right up here, we've got Wilhelm Wundt. So Wilhelm Wundt is credited with the scientific basis of psychology and for the development of the first psychology laboratory in Germany. So go ahead and highlight who he is and how he's kind of like that father of psychology here. Wundt claimed that psychological experiences are made of psychological experience, much like compounds found in chemistry, right? So he believed that there are two kinds of elements in psychology: sensation and emotions. Both of those are going to be their own type of unit. You don't have to know that right now, but we'll get deeper into those later on. And then he tried to gather evidence by checking claims in a procedure he called introspection. Again, looking into that later on, which is what the scientific method ultimately became. So that's it for 1.1. Make sure you guys are following along with all the schoolwork with it. 1.2, we're going to get more into those details about what psychology is and its historical approaches.